Number 1. Sam Cooke. If you were to write the history of soul music, the first chapter would undoubtedly be titled Sam Cooke. He was the man who invented the genre, the son of a preacher who took the raw, emotional power of the gospel church and brought it to the secular charts, with a voice so smooth, so effortless, and so undeniably beautiful that it earned him the title the King of Soul. He was the first black artist to own his own record label, a civil rights activist who wrote the anthem "A Change Is Gonna Come," and a superstar who was on the verge of reshaping the entire entertainment industry. But on a cold night in December 1964, the King of Soul didn't die in a castle. He died in a cheap, seedy motel room in South Los Angeles, wearing only a sport coat and one shoe, shot through the heart by a motel manager who claimed self-defense. This is the devastating, infuriating, and deeply suspicious story of a murder that the Los Angeles Police Department closed in a matter of days, but which the world has questioned for 60 years. We are investigating the 10 most chilling cold cases in music history, the crimes where the official story doesn't match the evidence and the killers walked free. If you believe that the truth behind these unsolved mysteries deserves to be uncovered, please subscribe to this channel right now to join our community of investigators. And if you appreciate this deep dive into the darkest secrets of the music industry, hit the like button to support the channel. To understand why the death of Sam Cooke is still an open wound, you have to look at the bizarre and contradictory details of that night. On the evening of December 10, 1964, Sam was dining at Martoni's, a high-end Italian restaurant in Hollywood. He was flashing a roll of cash, thousands of dollars, and was in high spirits. He met a woman named Elisa Boyer. They left together in his red Ferrari. What happened next is where the two versions of reality diverge violently. According to Boyer, Sam kidnapped her. She claimed he drove her against her will to the Hacienda Motel, a hot sheet establishment known for hourly rates and illicit activities. She claimed he dragged her into the room and tried to rape her. She said she waited for a moment when he was distracted, grabbed her clothes, and his clothes by mistake, and fled the room, running to a phone booth to call the police. This was the story the LAPD accepted immediately. But the forensic evidence and the testimony of the motel manager paint a different, far more confusing picture. The manager of the Hacienda was a woman named Bertha Franklin. She told police that a half-naked, enraged Sam Cooke broke into her office demanding to know where the girl was. She claimed he attacked her, grappling with her, and that in fear for her life, she grabbed a .22 caliber pistol and shot him 3 times. One bullet pierced his heart. She then inexplicably beat him over the head with a broomstick as he lay dying. Sam's last words, according to Franklin, were, "Lady, you shot me." He died there on the floor of the office. When the police arrived, they found the body of the most famous singer in America. But there were immediate red flags. Sam's clothes were missing. His money, the thousands of dollars he had been flashing earlier, was gone. He was wearing one shoe. His Ferrari was parked outside. The girl, Elisa Boyer, was later arrested for prostitution in a separate case, casting massive doubt on her kidnapping story. It looked less like a sexual assault and more like a robbery gone wrong, a trick roll where a woman lures a wealthy man to a secluded spot to rob him. But the theories go even deeper than a robbery. Sam Cooke wasn't just a singer, he was a threat to the establishment. He was a black man in 1964 who owned his own masters, ran his own publishing company, and refused to play to segregated audiences. He was friends with Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. He was becoming too powerful, too independent. Many in the black community, including his friend Etta James, who saw his body at the funeral, believed he had been beaten badly before he was shot. Etta James claimed his head was practically disconnected from his shoulders and his hands were broken, injuries that didn't match the struggle with a motel manager story. This fueled the theory that the Hacienda Motel incident was a setup, a staged crime scene designed to cover up a professional hit ordered by mob-connected music executives who wanted to take control of his financial empire. The fact that the LAPD, a force notorious for its racism in the 1960s, conducted a cursory investigation and declared it justifiable homicide within days only added fuel to the fire. There was no trial. Bertha Franklin was cleared by a coroner's inquest. Elisa Boyer was never charged for robbery. The case was closed. But for 60 years, the questions have remained. Why would a man with the world at his feet drive to a $3 motel to rape a woman he just met? Where did his money go? Why were his clothes missing? And who benefited the most from his death? This case is the JFK assassination of music. Do you believe the official story of a crime of passion and self-defense, or do you subscribe to the theory that Sam Cooke was assassinated to stop his rise as a black business mogul? Was he a victim of a robbery or a victim of a conspiracy? I want to hear your verdict on this American tragedy in the comments below. Sam Cooke sang "A Change Is Gonna Come," but for him, the only change was a bullet in a cheap motel, silencing the voice of the civil rights movement just as it was finding its full power. If this infuriating story of the King of Soul's unsolved murder left you stunned, please hit the like button, share this video with every music historian you know, and make sure you are subscribed for Part 2, where we will travel to the Mississippi Delta to uncover the legend of the bluesman who supposedly sold his soul to the devil and was poisoned by a jealous husband.
Number 2. Robert Johnson. We leave the neon lights of 1960s Los Angeles and travel back in time and space to the dust-choked, humid cotton fields of the Mississippi Delta in 1938 to investigate a death that is not just a cold case, it is the foundational myth of rock and roll itself. This is the story of Robert Johnson, the king of the Delta blues, a man whose life is shrouded in so much supernatural folklore that it is difficult to separate the man from the ghost. He is the phantom figure who allegedly walked to the crossroads of highways 61 and 49 at midnight, tuned his guitar, and sold his eternal soul to the devil in exchange for the ability to play the blues like no one else on earth. It is a legend that has captivated the world for nearly a century, fueling the mystique of bands like Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones who worshipped at his altar. But while the deal with the devil makes for a great story, the reality of Robert Johnson's death is far grittier, far more human, and legally completely unsolved. He didn't die in a burst of hellfire. He died on the floor of a sharecropper's shack, convulsing in agony, the victim of a jealous rage that was as lethal as any supernatural curse. This is the investigation into the first member of the 27 Club, a genius who was silenced not by Satan, but by a bottle of whiskey laced with poison in a crowded juke joint where the law didn't care to look too closely. We are investigating the 10 most chilling unsolved murders in music history. This case stands alone because the official record is almost non-existent. There was no CSI, no autopsy, and no trial. Just a body buried in a pine box and a whisper that traveled down the river. To understand the death of Robert Johnson, you have to understand the environment of the Delta bluesman. It was a life of wandering, hopping freight trains, and playing for tips in juke joints, makeshift bars in rural shacks where workers drank moonshine and danced to forget the brutality of their lives. Robert Johnson was a star in this circuit. He was handsome, he was talented, and he had a weakness that would prove fatal. He loved women, and he didn't care if they were married. In August 1938, Johnson was playing a residency at a place called the Three Forks Store near Greenwood, Mississippi. He had arguably become too comfortable there. He had begun a flirtation, or perhaps a full-blown affair, with the wife of the venue's owner. It was a dangerous game to play in a violent time and place. On the night of August 13th, 1938, the club was packed. The music was loud. The heat was oppressive. During a break in the set, a bottle of whiskey was sent to Johnson's table. It was an open bottle, the seal broken. According to the legend and the eyewitness testimony of fellow bluesman Sonny Boy Williamson, who was there that night, Johnson reached for the bottle. Williamson, sensing a trap, famously knocked it out of his hand, warning him, "Don't ever drink from an open bottle. You don't know what's in it." Johnson, furious at the waste of good liquor, reportedly snapped, "Don't ever knock a bottle out of my hand." When a second open bottle was brought over, Johnson drank it. He drank it down. He returned to the stage, playing with the ferocity that had made him a legend. But midway through the set, the music faltered. Johnson stopped playing. He fell ill, violently ill. He was helped off the stage and taken to a nearby house. For 3 days, the king of the Delta blues suffered in excruciating agony. He was convulsing, he was bleeding, he was hallucinating. The symptoms were consistent with strychnine poisoning, a substance commonly used to kill rats, easily available, and tasteless when dissolved in strong liquor. It doesn't kill instantly. It causes the muscles to tighten until the victim suffocates or dies of exhaustion. It is a horrific way to die. On August 16, 1938, Robert Johnson took his last breath. He was 27 years old. The aftermath was a void of justice. In the Jim Crow South of 1938, the death of an itinerant black musician was not a priority for the local sheriff. There was no investigation. No one was arrested. The owner of the Three Forks store, the man whose wife Johnson had been seeing, was never charged, never questioned on the record. Johnson was buried in a homemade coffin, possibly in an unmarked grave. There are actually 3 different cemeteries in Mississippi that claim to hold his bones, adding to the mystery. His death certificate, found decades later, simply listed "no doctor" under the cause of death. The killer walked free, protected by the apathy of the era. This case is the ultimate blend of myth and murder. Do you believe the Crossroads legend was created to cover up the mundane tragedy of a poisoning? Or does the supernatural element exist because we can't accept that a genius died over a petty affair? Was it the devil collecting his due, or just a jealous husband with a box of mothballs? I want to hear your thoughts on the death of the blues in the comments below. Robert Johnson's music was lost for decades until it was rediscovered in the 60s, influencing everyone from Eric Clapton to Bob Dylan. But the man himself remains a ghost, a victim of a perfect crime committed in a crowded room. He proved that you can write songs that live forever, but you can't outrun the jealousy of a man who pours your drinks. If this eerie story of the blues legend poisoned at the height of his powers left you stunned, please hit the like button, share this video with every rock historian you know, and make sure you are subscribed for part 3, where we will travel to the punk scene of Los Angeles to uncover the unsolved murder of a TV host who was bludgeoned to death in his sleep.
Number 3. Peter Ivers. We leave the juke joints of the Delta and fast forward to the neon-soaked, hairspray-filled underground of Los Angeles in 1983 to uncover a murder that silenced the most unique voice in the counterculture. This is the baffling, infuriating story of Peter Ivers, a man who was not just a musician, he was a cultural hub, the connective tissue between the polished world of Hollywood and the gritty, chaotic explosion of punk and new wave. He was a Harvard-educated genius, a harmonica virtuoso, and the charismatic host of New Wave Theater, a cult TV show that broadcast the anarchy of bands like the Dead Kennedys and Fear into living rooms across America. He wrote the haunting song In Heaven for David Lynch's Eraserhead. He was beloved, he was connected, and he was gentle. But on a March morning in his downtown loft, the man who gave a platform to the angry youth was beaten to death in his sleep with a violence that shocked even the hardened detectives of the LAPD.
This is the investigation into a crime scene that wasn't just cold, it was trampled, contaminated, and destroyed by the very people who loved the victim, creating a forensic nightmare that allowed a killer to walk free for 40 years. We are investigating the 10 most chilling unsolved murders in music history. This case stands out because the failure wasn't just in the act of killing, it was in the act of policing. A failure so profound that it turned a homicide investigation into a wake, where the evidence was swept away with the trash. The setting for this tragedy was a 6th-floor loft in the Skid Row Arts District of Los Angeles, a neighborhood that was dangerous, edgy, and vibrant. Peter Ivers lived there, unprotected, often leaving his door unlocked, trusting in the goodwill of the community he helped build. On March 3, 1983, Peter was found dead in his bed. He had been bludgeoned to death. The weapon, a bloody hammer, was found lying nearby. There was no sign of a struggle, suggesting he was killed while he slept or by someone he trusted enough to let into his personal space. But what happened after the body was discovered is what makes this case truly unsolved. The LAPD officers who responded to the scene reportedly failed to secure the loft. They didn't tape it off. They didn't post a guard. They simply left. In the vacuum of authority, Peter's friends, fans, and colleagues arrived. They weren't criminals. They were grieving artists, confused and in shock. They entered the loft. They walked through the blood. They sat on the furniture. They cleaned up the mess. In a heartbreaking attempt to help, they unknowingly destroyed every fingerprint, every footprint, and every fiber of DNA evidence that the killer might have left behind. Rumors swirled that amidst the grief, something more sinister was happening. There were whispers that people were looking for tapes, master recordings, video archives of new wave theater, or perhaps something compromising. Did someone enter that loft to sanitize the scene not just of blood, but of secrets? The investigation was dead on arrival. The LAPD officers, realizing the scene was compromised, seemingly gave up. They interviewed a few people, but the leads went nowhere. Was it a random intruder from Skid Row? Was it a jealous rival in the music scene? Or was it someone closer, a friend, who knew exactly where the hammer was kept? The list of suspects was vast because Peter knew everyone, but the evidence to narrow it down had been vacuumed up by well-meaning mourners. Decades later, books have been written and podcasts recorded pointing fingers at various figures in the LA punk scene, but without forensic proof, they remain just theories. The killer of Peter Ivers essentially committed the perfect crime, aided by the incompetence of the police and the chaos of the grieving process. This case is a masterclass in how not to handle a crime scene. Do you think the police negligence was due to laziness, or was there a bias against the punk subculture that made them care less about the victim? If the crime scene hadn't been contaminated, do you think we would know the killer today? I want to hear your verdict on the LAPD's failure in the comments below. Peter Ivers was the soul of the LA Underground, a man who championed the weird and the wild. His death marked the end of an era of innocence in the scene. He proved that you can be the most beloved man in the city, but if you leave your door unlocked in the wrong neighborhood, the city will eventually come in. He remains a ghost in the machine, the host who signed off permanently, leaving behind a static hiss of unanswered questions. If this infuriating story of a botched investigation and a lost genius left you stunned, please hit the like button, share this video with every punk rock fan you know, and make sure you are subscribed for Part 4, where we will travel to Amsterdam to uncover the mysterious death of the Prince of Cool, a jazz legend who fell from a hotel window. Or was he pushed?
Number 4. Chet Baker. We cross the Atlantic to the rainy cobblestone streets of Amsterdam, diving into the hazy underworld of the European jazz scene in the late 1980s to investigate the death of a man who was once the most beautiful face in American music. This is the tragic, mysterious end of Chesney Henry Chet Baker Jr., the Prince of Cool. In the 1950s, Chet Baker was the James Dean of jazz, a trumpet player with a sound so pure and a voice so fragile that he defined the West Coast cool aesthetic. He was a heartthrob, a cover model, a man who had it all. But beneath the chiseled jawline and the angelic tone lay a demon that would consume him from the inside out, a heroin addiction that lasted for decades. By 1988, the Prince was a ghost. His face was lined and gaunt. His teeth had been knocked out in a drug dispute years earlier, forcing him to relearn his instrument with dentures. And he was living a nomadic existence in Europe, playing for cash to feed his habit. But despite the decay, the genius remained. He was in the middle of a career renaissance, playing with a haunting maturity that mesmerized audiences. However, on a Friday the 13th in May, the music stopped violently on a sidewalk outside the Hotel Prince Hendrik, leaving behind a body, a trumpet, and a question that has haunted jazz fans for 35 years. Did the Prince of Cool fall? Did he jump? Or was he pushed by the dark world he inhabited? We are investigating the 10 most chilling unsolved murders in music history. This case stands out because the police closed it in minutes, labeling it an accident of addiction, while those who knew him best screamed that it was a hit, a final collection of a debt that could only be paid in blood. To understand the mystery, you have to look at the timeline of May 13, 1988. Chet Baker was in Amsterdam for a concert. He checked into the Hotel Prince Hendrik, a modest establishment near the red light district, a convenient location for a man with his vices. He was 58 years old. Around 3 a.m., his body was discovered on the stone pavement below his second-floor room. He had suffered massive head injuries. His trumpet was found in the room, but his dignity was left on the street. The Dutch police arrived, saw a known junkie dead outside a hotel, and did the math. They found heroin and cocaine in his room. They concluded that he had gotten high, lost his balance, and fallen out of the window. Or, perhaps, in a moment of despair, he had jumped. They ruled it accidental death or suicide and closed the file before the sun fully rose. It was a clean, simple narrative for a messy life. But the physical evidence at the scene tells a story that is physically impossible to reconcile with an accident. The window of his hotel room did not open fully. It opened only about 15 to 20 inches. For a grown man to fall through such a narrow gap accidentally is highly unlikely. To go through it, you would have to squeeze, to climb, or to be forced. Furthermore, the trajectory of the fall was suspicious. Chet didn't land directly under the window. He landed several feet away, striking his head on a concrete post. This suggests momentum. It suggests he was thrown. Friends and family immediately rejected the suicide theory. Chet was enjoying a comeback. He had gigs booked, money in his pocket, and was reportedly in good spirits. Why would he kill himself now? And then there were the rumors of the visitor. Witnesses reported seeing a man entering the hotel with Chet earlier that night, a man described as a drug dealer or a fixer. Chet was known to be in debt to dangerous people. In the drug world, if you don't pay, you pay with pain. Did a dealer come to collect? Did an argument ensue in that small room? Did someone grab the frail 58-year-old musician and shove him through the narrow opening of the window to send a message? The room was reportedly locked from the inside, a detail the police used to justify the accident theory. But in the world of old European hotels with skeleton keys and transoms, locked is a relative term. The autopsy revealed drugs in his system, but not an overdose amount. He was lucid enough to know he was falling. This case is a Rorschach test for how we view addiction. The police saw a junkie and assumed his death was his own fault, doing almost no investigation. Do you think their bias allowed a murderer to walk free? Is it possible to accidentally fall through a window that barely opens? Or does the physics point undeniably to foul play? I want to hear your verdict on the death of the jazz icon in the comments below. Chet Baker's death was the final tragic note in a life that was a long, slow suicide. He was a man who played like an angel and lived like a devil, and in the end, gravity caught up with him. He remains the Prince of Cool, but his crown was tarnished by the mystery of his final descent. He fell from grace, and then he fell from a window, leaving the world to wonder if he let go or if he was pushed. If this atmospheric noir-style mystery of a jazz legend's suspicious death left you stunned, please hit the like button, share this video with every jazz aficionado you know, and make sure you are subscribed for Part 5, where we will travel to New Orleans to uncover the gruesome mystery of a punk rock icon found dead in a hotel room in a shape that defied medical explanation.
Number 5. Johnny Thunders. We leave the canals of Amsterdam and return to the gothic, humidity-soaked streets of New Orleans, a city that seems to collect tragedies like souvenirs, to investigate the gruesome and baffling end of a punk rock godfather. This is the disturbing story of John Anthony Genzali, immortalized as Johnny Thunders. As the guitarist for the New York Dolls, he was the bridge between the swagger of the Rolling Stones and the nihilism of the Sex Pistols. He was the archetype of the wasted rock star, skinny, heroin chic, with a guitar slung low and a cigarette permanently dangling from his lip. He wrote the book on junkie rock, influencing everyone from the Ramones to Guns N' Roses. But by 1991, the glamour had faded into a grim struggle for survival. Johnny was 38 years old, battling a severe addiction and reportedly suffering from advanced leukemia, though this diagnosis remains a point of contention among those who knew him. He arrived in New Orleans in April, not to tour, but to get his life together, or perhaps just to find a new place to score. He checked into the St. Peter House Hotel in the French Quarter, a budget establishment that fit his dwindling finances. What happened inside Room 7 on the night of April 23, 1991, is a mystery that combines the horror of a crime scene with the incompetence of a police force that saw a dead junkie and decided not to look any closer. We are investigating the 10 most chilling unsolved murders in music history. This case is particularly haunting because the physical state of the body suggested a level of violence or tampering that was completely ignored by the official report, leaving friends and fans to wonder if the punk icon was simply allowed to rot or if he was actively destroyed by the vultures who preyed on his addiction. To understand the suspicion surrounding his death, you have to look at the condition of the room and the body. Johnny Thunders wasn't found peacefully in bed. His body was discovered crammed underneath a dresser or a coffee table in a position that defied anatomical logic. Witnesses described him as being twisted into a pretzel, a U-shape that suggested he had been forced into that space. Rigor mortis had set in, locking his body in this unnatural contortion, which implies he died in that position or was moved there shortly after death. Why would a man overdosing on drugs crawl under a dresser and twist himself into a knot? It didn't make sense. Furthermore, the room had been tossed. It was ransacked. Johnny's passport was missing, his clothes were missing, and most importantly, his supply of methadone, the synthetic opiate he was using to manage his heroin cravings, was gone. In the world of addiction, methadone is liquid gold. If Johnny had overdosed, the empty bottles would be there. If he had died of natural causes, his possessions would be there. The empty room screamed robbery. The local police, however, saw a famous drug addict dead in a cheap hotel and applied the simplest label they could find: drug-related. They conducted a cursory investigation. The initial autopsy was confusing. It cited drug-related causes, but toxicology reports later showed that the levels of drugs in his system were not necessarily lethal for a man with his tolerance. There were rumors that he had been given LSD against his will, or that he had been supplied with a hot shot of bad heroin by local dealers who knew he had cash. The leukemia theory was also floated as a convenient explanation for his frail state, but friends argued he was actually in decent health before the trip. The most prevailing theory among the punk community is that Johnny Thunders was targeted by local dealers or friends he had made in the quarter. They waited until he was vulnerable, perhaps intoxicated, and then robbed him, stripping the room of anything valuable. In the process, violence occurred, either a struggle that ended with him being crushed under the furniture or a deliberate act of stuffing him there while he was dying to hide the body or simply out of cruelty. The missing methadone suggests a motive of pure greed. Someone stole his medicine to sell or use, leaving him to die in agony. This case highlights the tragic way society and law enforcement devalues the lives of addicts. The police saw a junkie and closed the book, ignoring the signs of a struggle and robbery. Do you believe that if Johnny Thunders had been a clean-cut pop star, the Pretzel body and the ransacked room would have triggered a murder investigation? Was this a robbery gone wrong, or just the sad, lonely end of a life lived on the edge? I want to hear your verdict on the police's handling of this case in the comments below. Johnny Thunders was the heart of the New York underground, a man who lived the Born to Lose motto until it killed him. His death marked the end of the original punk era, a grim finale in a city known for its ghosts. He remains a legend, but his final hours are a black hole of unanswered questions, a silent scream from beneath a hotel dresser that no one bothered to hear. If this disturbing story of a punk legend found twisted and robbed in a hotel room left you stunned, please hit the like button, share this video with every rock historian you know, and make sure you are subscribed for part 6, where we will travel to the sunny waters of Mexico to uncover the infuriating, unsolved murder of a British folk star who was killed by a millionaire speedboat.
Number 6. Kirsty MacColl. We trade the claustrophobic horror of city hotel rooms for the blinding, sun-drenched beauty of Cozumel, Mexico, to witness a crime that is perhaps the most infuriating on this entire list, because it happened in paradise, in broad daylight, and in front of dozens of witnesses. Yet the person truly responsible was never punished. This is the heartbreaking story of Kirsty MacColl, a beloved British singer-songwriter with a sharp wit and a voice of gold. To the world, she is immortalized as the female voice in the Pogues' Christmas anthem, Fairy Tale of New York, a song that is played millions of times every December. But Kirsty was more than just a seasonal hitmaker. She was a mother, a feminist icon, and a brilliant artist who was enjoying a well-deserved family vacation with her 2 sons and her partner. On December 18, 2000, she went into the water to explore the Chonkanab Reef, a designated marine park that was legally restricted to swimmers and divers. It was supposed to be a safe zone, a sanctuary of nature. But that sanctuary was violated by a 30-foot twin-engined powerboat named the Pretzel, a vessel that was tearing through the restricted water at illegal speeds. What followed was not just a tragic accident. It was an act of negligent homicide, followed by a cover-up so brazen, so corrupt, and so insulting to the value of human life that it sparked an international diplomatic incident. This is the devastating account of a mother's final heroic act to save her child from a speeding bullet made of fiberglass, and the subsequent legal farce that allowed a Mexican multimillionaire to buy his way out of a murder charge for the price of a speeding ticket. We are investigating the 10 most chilling, unsolved murders in music history. This case is unsolved not because we don't know who was on the boat, but because the law refuses to acknowledge who was driving it, leaving a family with a hole in their hearts and a burning sense of injustice. The timeline of the tragedy is a matter of seconds. Kirsty and her sons, Jamie and Louis, were surfacing from a dive. They were in the designated diving area, marked by buoys. The Pretzel came roaring into the zone. It was a massive, powerful machine, cutting through the waves with reckless abandon. Kirsty saw it coming. She saw the trajectory. She realized instantly that the boat was heading straight for her 15-year-old son, Jamie.
In a moment of pure adrenaline-fueled maternal instinct, she didn't try to swim away. She swam toward the danger. She reached out and violently pushed her son out of the path of the oncoming vessel. She saved his life. But the action put her directly in the line of fire. The boat ran over her. The propeller struck her with catastrophic force, severing her spinal cord and killing her instantly in the churning red water. Her son survived with only minor injuries, alive solely because his mother had traded her life for his. It was a sacrifice of biblical proportions, a final act of love that defines her legacy far more than any song ever could. But as the body of the music legend was pulled from the water, the machinery of corruption began to turn. The Percol was owned by Guillermo González Nova, one of the wealthiest men in Mexico, the head of a massive supermarket chain. He was on board the boat that day, along with several family members and employees. When the police arrived, the narrative was already being constructed. The millionaire owner did not take responsibility. Instead, a boat hand, a lowly employee named Jose Senyam, stepped forward. He claimed he was driving. He took the blame. It was a classic fall guy scenario, a poor man taking the heat for a rich man. Eyewitnesses, however, told a different story. They reported that Senyam wasn't driving, that he wasn't even at the controls. They pointed fingers at the wealthy owner or one of his family members. But in the Mexican legal system of the time, money talked louder than witnesses. The investigation was cursory. The confession of the deckhand was accepted without serious challenge. Senyam was convicted of culpable homicide. But here is the detail that makes the blood boil. Under Mexican law, he was allowed to pay a fine in lieu of a prison sentence. He was fined 1,034 pesos. At the time, that was approximately $90. The life of Kirsty MacColl, a mother, a star, a human being, was valued at less than the cost of a nice dinner. He walked free. The real driver, whoever it was among the wealthy elite on that boat, never spent a second in handcuffs. The Justice for Kirsty campaign was launched by her mother, Jean MacColl, and supported by stars like Bono and Billy Bragg. They fought for years to have the case reopened, to have the federal authorities investigate the corruption and the cover-up. They presented evidence, they lobbied governments, they kept her name in the press. But the Mexican authorities refused to budge. They considered the case closed. The file was shut. The millionaire went back to his supermarkets, the deckhand went back to his life, and Kirsty MacColl remained dead, her killer unpunished. This case is a brutal demonstration of the global disparity in justice. It suggests that if you are rich enough, you can literally get away with murder in broad daylight. Do you believe the witnesses who say the millionaire was driving? Is a $90 fine for a life the ultimate insult, or is it just the reality of a flawed legal system? I want to hear your outrage and your thoughts on this miscarriage of justice in the comments below. Kirsty MacColl's death leaves a void that is felt every Christmas when her voice rings out on the radio. She was a woman who sang about hard luck and fairy tales, but her own ending was a grim reality of corruption. She died a hero, saving her son, but she was treated by the law as nothing more than a speed bump for the rich. If this infuriating story of a mother's sacrifice and a billionaire's escape left you stunned, please hit the like button, share this video to keep the demand for justice alive, and make sure you are subscribed for Part 7, where we will travel to the Bay Area to uncover the unsolved highway shooting of the king of the hippie movement.
Number 7. Mac Dre. We leave the tropical waters of Mexico and head to the concrete arteries of the American Midwest, specifically Highway 71 in Kansas City, Missouri, to investigate the assassination of a man who was not just a rapper, but the architect of an entire culture. This is the story of Andre Hicks, known to the Bay Area and the world as Mac Dre. He was the godfather of the hyphy movement, a high-energy, rebellious, and uniquely Californian subculture that influenced everything from slang to dance to the way people drove their cars.
Mac Dre was a legend, a man who had served 5 years in prison for his alleged role in the Romper Room robbery gang, only to come out and build an independent music empire from the ground up without the help of major labels. He was the CEO of Thiz Entertainment, a charismatic, larger-than-life figure who preached independence and partying. But his success made him a target, and his past made him a mark. On a cold November night in 2004, the King of the Bay found himself far from home, navigating a city where the rules of engagement were different, and where a dispute over a canceled concert would spiral into a high-speed execution on a dark highway. This is the devastating account of a drive-by shooting that didn't just kill a man. It sparked a bi-coastal war of retaliation that left bodies in Las Vegas and California, creating a cycle of violence so complex and so bloody that the original murder, the killing of Mac Dre himself, was left behind, technically unsolved, a cold case file gathering dust while the streets handled the verdict with bullets instead of gavels. We are investigating the 10 most chilling unsolved murders in music history. This case stands out because it is widely believed that the killers were identified and punished, not by the police, but by Mac Dre's friends, leaving the official legal record blank, while the street record is written in blood. The timeline of the murder takes us to the weekend of Halloween, 2004. Mac Dre and his crew had traveled to Kansas City for a show. It was supposed to be a routine stop, a payday. But there was tension in the air. Reports suggest there was a dispute with a local promoter or a rival rapper named Anthony Fat Tone Watkins. The details are murky. Perhaps money was owed, perhaps a show was canceled, perhaps it was a simple clash of egos. Whatever the spark, the fire was lit. On the early morning of November 1st, 2004, Mac Dre was a passenger in a white van, traveling northbound on U.S. Route 71. He was heading back to his hotel, or perhaps to the airport, ready to leave the city behind. But he was being followed. A black Infiniti G35, driving with its lights off, crept up behind the van. It wasn't a random encounter. It was a hunting party. As the van moved through the darkness, the Infiniti pulled alongside. The windows rolled down. A gunman leaned out and opened fire into the driver's side of the van. The attack was precise and overwhelming. The bullets tore through the metal skin of the van. The driver of Mac Dre's vehicle, terrified and under fire, swerved. He overcorrected. The van lost control, careening across the median and into a deep ditch between the north and southbound lanes. The vehicle rolled violently. Mac Dre, who was reportedly unbuckled, was ejected from the van. He was thrown into the cold grass of the highway median. When the first responders arrived, they found the rap legend dead. He had suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the neck, but he had also been crushed by the force of the crash. The black Infiniti had vanished into the night. The King of the Bay was dead at 34, leaving a void in the West Coast scene that has never been filled. The Kansas City police opened an investigation, but they ran into a wall of silence. No one in the van saw the shooter. No witnesses came forward. The code of silence that Mac Dre had lived by was now protecting his killers. But while the police were stalled, the street detectives were working overtime. The rumors immediately centered on Fat Tone. The word on the street was that he had ordered the hit or pulled the trigger himself. What followed was a gruesome sequel that explains why Mac Dre's murder remains unsolved by the law. 6 months later, Fat Tone and his friend were found murdered in a construction site in Las Vegas. They had been lured there, allegedly by a rapper named Mac Minister, a friend of Mac Dre. It was a revenge killing, a life for a life.
McMinister was eventually convicted for the murders of Fat Tone and his associate, effectively closing the loop of violence in the eyes of the streets. Because the prime suspect in Mac Dre's murder, Fat Tone, was dead, the police had no one to charge. The case of Mac Dre's assassination was officially left open, a cold case with a dead suspect. It is a legal ghost town. This case is a prime example of street justice replacing legal justice. Do you believe that the retaliatory murder of Fat Tone solved the case? Or is it a tragedy that Mac Dre's actual killer was never tried in a court of law? Does violence ever truly balance the scales, or does it just create more victims? I want to hear your thoughts on this cycle of vengeance in the comments below. Mac Dre's legacy is massive. His slang, his dance moves, and his music are still the heartbeat of the Bay Area. But his death is a grim reminder of the dangers of touring without protection in hostile territory. He was a king who died on a foreign road, a casualty of a beef that wasn't worth the price of admission. If this gritty, complex story of a hip-hop legend caught in a crossfire left you stunned, please hit the like button, share this video with every rap fan you know, and make sure you are subscribed for Part 8, where we will travel to the bounce scene of New Orleans to uncover the mysterious execution of a female rap pioneer.
Number 8. Magnolia, Shorty. We return to the humid, rhythmic streets of New Orleans, a city that birthed jazz and blues but also gave the world bounce, a high-energy, rapid-fire hip-hop subgenre that is the heartbeat of the housing projects. If Soulja Slim was the king of this sound, then Renetta Lowe, known to the world as Magnolia Shorty, was its undisputed queen. She was a pioneer, the first female artist signed to Birdman's Cash Money Records, a woman whose voice and energy defined the block parties and clubs of the NO for over a decade. She was beloved, a hood celebrity who had transcended the grime of the Magnolia projects to become a local icon, famous for her hit Monkey on the Dick and her infectious spirit. She was not a gangster. She was the life of the party, a woman who was planning her wedding, buying a gown, and looking forward to a future far away from the violence that had claimed so many of her peers. But in the treacherous ecosystem of New Orleans street life, your own innocence is often irrelevant if you are standing next to the wrong person. This is the devastating account of a double homicide that wasn't just a shooting, it was an annihilation. A barrage of gunfire so excessive and so brutal that it left the city reeling in shock. We are investigating the 10 most chilling unsolved or partially resolved murders in music history. This case stands as a terrifying example of collateral damage, proving that in a gang war, the bullets don't have names, and a legend can be wiped out simply for giving a friend a ride to the store. The timeline of the massacre takes us to the afternoon of December 20th, 2010. It was a Monday, just days before Christmas. Magnolia Shorty was 28 years old. She was busy, preparing for a show in Miami and getting ready for her upcoming wedding. She was driving her Chevrolet Malibu, a modest car for a star, through the New Orleans East neighborhood, specifically near the Georgetown of New Orleans apartment complex. In the passenger seat was a man named Jerome Ankman Hampton. This is the crucial detail, the hinge upon which the tragedy swings. Jerome Hampton was not a musician. He was a man allegedly deeply entrenched in the violent rivalries of the streets, specifically linked to the 39ers gang feud that was tearing the city apart. To Renetta, he was just a friend, someone she grew up with, someone she was giving a ride. But to the predators watching the complex, he was a high-value target, an enemy combatant who had to be removed from the board. Renetta pulled her car into the gate of the apartment complex. She was trapped. It was the perfect kill box. A vehicle pulled up behind them, blocking their escape. Another vehicle may have blocked the front. It was a military-style ambush, coordinated and ruthless.
The gunmen didn't just fire a warning shot, they unleashed hell. They opened fire on the Malibu with semi-automatic weapons. The sound was deafening, a continuous roar of gunfire that shredded the metal and glass of the car. This wasn't a targeted hit with a single bullet. It was an overkill designed to send a message to the entire city. The police later recovered over 50 shell casings from the scene. The car was riddled with holes. Inside, there was no chance of survival. Renetta Magnolia Shorty Lowe was struck 26 times. 26 bullets. Her body was decimated. Jerome Hampton was also killed instantly. The killers sped off, leaving the Queen of Bounce dead in her seat, her wedding plans and her music career extinguished in a storm of lead that wasn't even meant for her. She was simply in the driver's seat of a car that contained a marked man. The murder sent New Orleans into a state of mourning that rivaled the death of Soulja Slim. The funeral was a massive second-line parade, the streets filled with thousands of people dancing and crying, celebrating the woman who had made the move. But the investigation was slow and murky. For years, the case was technically unsolved, a cold case file collecting dust. It wasn't until years later, during a sweeping federal RICO indictment against the 39ers gang, that the truth began to emerge. Prosecutors alleged that the hit was ordered by rival gang members targeting Hampton and that they didn't care who was in the car with him. They saw an opportunity and took it, regarding the life of a music legend as acceptable collateral damage in their war for territory and respect. While specific members of the gang were eventually linked to the crime in federal court documents, the sense of justice remains diluted. It wasn't a single jealous lover or a stalker. It was the street itself that killed her. This case terrifies us because it highlights the randomness of death in a violent city. Renetta did nothing wrong. She was just being a friend. Do you believe that people in these environments have a responsibility to cut off ties with anyone involved in the streets to stay safe? Or is that an impossible ask when those people are your childhood friends? Was she a victim of loyalty? I want to hear your thoughts on this impossible situation in the comments below. Magnolia Shorty is remembered today as a pioneer who opened the door for female rappers in the South, including stars like Megan Thee Stallion and City Girls, who cite the bounce sound as an influence. But her death is a grim monument to the cost of proximity. She died because she was sitting 18 inches away from a target, proving that in the crossfire of a gang war, fame is not a bulletproof vest. If this tragic story of the Queen of Bounce silenced my 26 bullets left you stunned, please hit the like button, share this video with every hip-hop fan you know, and make sure you are subscribed for Part 9, where we will travel to the East Coast to uncover the mystery of a Tupac associate who witnessed a murder and then silenced himself.
Number 9. Yaki Kadafi. We leave the chaotic, humid streets of New Orleans and travel north to the cold, gray housing projects of Irvington, New Jersey, to investigate a death that is not just a murder, it is the missing link in the most famous assassination in music history. This is the story of Yafeo Fula, known to the world as Yaki Kadafi, a member of the Outlaws and a rising star in the hip-hop world. But his significance goes far beyond his verses. Yaki Kadafi was the godbrother of Tupac Shakur. They grew up together, their mothers were both Black Panthers, and they shared a bond that was deeper than blood. He was Tupac's shadow, his protector, and his confidant. But on the night of September 7, 1996, in Las Vegas, Yaki Kadafi became something else. He became the star witness. He was riding in the car directly behind Tupac's BMW when the white Cadillac pulled up. He looked down the barrel of the gun. He saw the shooter's face. He was the only person in the entourage who was willing to break the code of silence and tell the police that he could identify the man who killed the biggest rap star on the planet.
but he never got the chance to testify. Just 2 months after Tupac died, Yaki Kadafi was silenced in a hallway in New Jersey, a loose end that was tied up with a single bullet to the head. This is the infuriating, suspicious, and officially accidental account of a murder that conveniently removed the one man who could have solved the Tupac case in 1996, changing the course of hip-hop history and allowing a killer to walk free for another 27 years. We are investigating the 10 most chilling unsolved murders in music history. This case stands out because the timing is so mathematically suspicious that it defies the laws of probability, suggesting that the East Coast versus West Coast war wasn't just about lyrics. It was about eliminating witnesses. To understand the weight of this murder, you have to understand the pressure Yaki Kadafi was under in November 1996. Tupac was dead. Suge Knight was in jail. The death row empire was crumbling, and the Las Vegas police were desperate. They knew Kadafi had seen the shooter. They had interviewed him briefly, and he had reportedly told them he could pick the killer out of a lineup. The streets knew this too. The Southside Crips, the gang responsible for Tupac's murder, knew there was a witness who could put them away for life. Kadafi was a walking target. He retreated to New Jersey, to the territory he knew, trying to lay low, trying to process the grief of losing his brother. On the night of November 10, 1996, he was at an apartment building on Mechanic Street in Irvington. It was 3:48 a.m. He was visiting a friend. He was reportedly wearing a bulletproof vest, a testament to the fear he was living in. But a vest cannot protect your head. He found him slumped in the third-floor hallway. He had been shot once, directly in the forehead, execution style. There was no struggle. There was no robbery. His jewelry was still on him. It was a cold, clean kill. The immediate reaction from the public and the police was skepticism. The official story that emerged from the apartment was bizarre. The witnesses claimed it was an accident. They claimed that Kadafi and another man, a cousin named Roddy, were playing with a gun, or that Roddy was intoxicated and the gun just went off. It is the same excuse used in countless cover-ups. The idea that a man who had just seen his godbrother murdered, a man who was wearing body armor because he feared assassination, would be playing with a loaded gun in a hallway at 3 a.m. strains credulity. For years, the accident theory was the official line, but it never sat right with the fans or the family. Why would a cousin shoot him? Why then? Why there? The accident was simply too convenient for the enemies of Tupac Shakur. It removed the primary threat to Orlando Anderson and the Southside Crips. It closed the door on the Vegas investigation. With Kadafi dead, the Las Vegas police claimed they had no other leads, and the Tupac case went cold for nearly 30 years. Years later, another member of the Outlaws, Napoleon, revealed that the shooter was indeed their cousin, Roddy. He claimed in interviews that it was a drunken mistake, a tragic fumble of a weapon. But even this admission divides the community. Many believe that accident is a code word, a cover story concocted to protect the family from the shame of a paid hit or a coerced execution. Was Roddy pressured? Was there a bounty on Kadafi's head that reached all the way to New Jersey? Or was it truly a cosmic, tragic coincidence that the only witness to the most famous murder in rap history just happened to accidentally shoot himself in the head 2 months later? This case relies entirely on your belief in coincidence. Do you think it is statistically possible for the sole witness of Tupac's murder to die by accident 60 days later? Or was this a cleanup operation disguised as a tragedy? Does the recent arrest of Keffe D in the Tupac case change how you view Kadafi's death? I want to hear your verdict on this conspiracy in the comments below. Yaki Kadafi's death is the black hole of the Tupac saga.
If he had lived, if he had testified, the history of the 90s would be radically different. Orlando Anderson might have gone to prison in 1996. The East-West War might have ended with a gavel instead of more graves. Kadafi died at 19 years old, a soldier who fell on the battlefield of loyalty, silenced by a bullet that has conspiracy written all over it. He remains the ghost in the machine, the man who knew too much and paid the ultimate price for his vision. If this infuriating story of the witness who was silenced before he could speak left you stunned, please hit the like button, share this video with every hip-hop historian you know, and make sure you are subscribed for Part 10, the final and most mysterious chapter, where we will travel to 1960s Los Angeles to uncover the story of a rock star found dead in his car, soaked in gasoline, in a case the police called suicide, but the world calls murder.
Number 10. Bobby Fuller. We end our investigation in the sun-bleached, noir-tinged streets of Hollywood in the summer of 1966 to uncover a death that is widely considered the Black Dahlia of rock and roll. This is the baffling, terrifying, and officially accidental end of Bobby Fuller, the handsome, charismatic frontman of the Bobby Fuller Four. He was the heir apparent to Buddy Holly, a Texas rocker who brought a driving, infectious beat to the Sunset Strip with the smash hit I Fought the Law. He was on the verge of superstardom, a young man with movie star looks and a sound that defined the transition from surf rock to the counterculture. But just as his song was climbing the charts, Bobby Fuller fought something far more dangerous than the law. He fought the mob-controlled underbelly of the music industry, and he lost. This is the devastating account of a body found in a car, soaked in gasoline, but not burned, a crime scene that looked like a professional hit, but was written off by the police with an explanation so absurd, so physically impossible, that it suggests a cover-up of massive proportions. We have investigated the 10 most chilling unsolved murders in music history. We end here because this case is the ultimate locked room mystery, a gruesome tableau that serves as a permanent reminder that in the 1960s, record contracts were often signed in blood. The timeline of the tragedy takes us to July 18, 1966. Bobby Fuller was 23 years old. He had been staying at his apartment in Hollywood, but he had received a mysterious phone call late the night before. He left in his mother's Oldsmobile and never returned. The next afternoon, his mother, Lorraine, found the car parked in the driveway of their apartment complex. It hadn't been there earlier. Someone had driven it back. When she opened the door, she was hit by a wall of fumes. Inside, sprawled across the front seat, was her son. Bobby Fuller was dead. But the condition of his body was the stuff of nightmares. He was drenched in gasoline. His skin was battered and bruised. He was in an advanced state of rigor mortis, suggesting he had been dead for hours, yet the car had only recently appeared in the driveway. This meant he had been killed somewhere else, kept in a different location, and then staged in the car. The most chilling detail was the gas can found in the vehicle. It was empty. The Los Angeles Police Department arrived, but their actions only deepened the mystery. In a move that still enrages forensic experts today, they didn't treat it as a homicide. They treated it as a suicide. The initial coroner's report listed the cause of death as accidental asphyxiation, suggesting that Bobby had, somehow, poured gasoline on himself inside a closed car and inhaled the fumes until he died. Or, even more unbelievably, that he intended to set himself on fire, but died from the fumes first.
This theory ignored the bruises on his body, the blood on his chest, and the sheer illogical insanity of a rising rock star choosing such a gruesome, painful, and complicated way to end his life. There was no suicide note. There was no history of depression. He was weeks away from a tour. The suicide theory was a slap in the face to his family and his bandmates, who knew the truth. Bobby wanted out of his contract. He had been signed to a label with deep, reputed ties to organized crime. He had been asking questions about his money. He had been talking about going solo. In the 1960s music business, these were firing offenses. The prevailing theory, supported by decades of research by authors and historians, is that Bobby Fuller was murdered by mob enforcers to send a message to other artists: do what you are told, or else. The gasoline was likely intended to burn the evidence, to torch the car and the body, but something spooked the killers. Perhaps a neighbor walked by. Perhaps they lost their nerve. So they left him there, soaked in fuel, a grim warning left in a driveway in Hollywood. The gas can, a crucial piece of evidence that could have held fingerprints, was reportedly thrown away by the police. The car was never dusted for prints. The file was closed. Accident. This case is the ultimate example of a fix. The police explanation defies physics and logic. Do you believe the mob had the power to silence the LAPD in 1966, or was this just gross incompetence? Was Bobby Fuller the victim of a contract dispute that turned lethal? I want to hear your verdict on this rock and roll noir mystery in the comments below. Bobby Fuller sang, "I fought the law and the law won." But in his case, the law didn't win. It failed. It looked away. He remains the lost prince of the 60s, a talent extinguished not by a plane crash or an overdose, but by the cold, hard reality of a business that was often run by gangsters. He lies in Forest Lawn Cemetery, a mystery wrapped in a melody, the man who was silenced before he could sing his second verse. This concludes our deep dive into the 10 chilling music industry murders that are still unsolved. We have traveled from the motels of LA to the deserts of the Delta, seeing that for some legends, the music stops not with a fade out, but with a gunshot. If this series opened your eyes to the hidden history of the music world, please hit the like button, share this video with every music fan you know, and make sure you are subscribed and have the bell turned on. We have a massive new investigation starting next week that digs into the dark secrets of Hollywood's biggest child stars.